Here's something that's gonna mess with your head. Your great-great-grandfather ate, and he was fine. No bloating, no brain fog, no gut issues, but you eat one slice and you feel like garbage for the rest of the day. So what's going on? Are you just weaker than previous generations? Is your gut defective? Did evolution somehow forget to prepare humans for bread? No, the truth is way more disturbing than that. The bread on your table isn't the same food your grandparents ate. It's not even close. And what happened to wheat in the last 60 years is one of the biggest cover-ups in modern food history. Stick with me, because what you're about to learn will completely change how you look at every loaf on the supermarket shelf. Let's go back for a second. Way back in 1324, in a village outside York, England, the average peasant consumed 2 to 3 pounds of bread every single day. That was roughly 70% of their total calories. These weren't soft desk job workers. These were people hauling stones, plowing fields with hand tools, building cathedrals that are still standing today. Brutal physical labor, 12 to 14 hours a day, and they thrived on bread. No diabetes epidemic, no celiac disease crisis, no inflammatory bowel disease affecting 1 in every 100 people like we see today now. Fast forward to 2024, 1 in 3 adults is pre-diabetic. Celiac disease has increased by 400%. Since the 1950s, millions more suffer from what doctors vaguely call non-celiac gluten sensitivity, bloating, brain fog, joint pain, chronic fatigues. So what changed? The food industry will tell you it's because we're lazy. We don't move enough. We eat too much. But medieval peasants worked hard because they had to, not because they had gym memberships, and they ate more bread than we do today. The difference wasn't activity level. The difference was the bread itself, because here's the thing nobody wants to admit. Modern bread is not bread. It's an industrialized food product designed for profit margins and shelf life, not nutrition. And the medieval peasant you've been taught to pity, he knew something about wheat that billion-dollar food corporations desperately want you to forget. Pick up a loaf of supermarket bread right now. Go ahead. I'll wait. Look at the ingredients. You'll see something like this. Enriched wheat flour. That's code for wheat that's been stripped of everything valuable, then injected with synthetic vitamins to meet legal minimums. High fructose corn syrup, soybean oil, mono and digluten, calcium propionate, azotic. That's also used in yoga mats and shoe rubber. Yeah, you're eating yoga mat chemical. This isn't bread. This is a science experiment wrapped in plastic. Medieval bread had 3 ingredients: flour, water, salt, sometimes a bit of natural leaven or yeast. That's it. Modern industrial bread needs 20 to 30 ingredients just to stay soft for 2 weeks on a shelf, and that's just the beginning of the problem. Let's talk about the wheat itself, because this is where a scientist named Norman Borlaug developed what he called miracle wheat. Shorter stalks, higher yields, resistant to disease. He won the Nobel Prize for it. The Green Revolution. They called it. It fed millions, but there was a cost nobody talked about. This new wheat, technically called semi-dwarf wheat, was bred for one thing: maximum yield per acre. Not nutrition, not digest, not how your body would respond to it. Plant breeders introduced genetic changes that altered the gluten structure, increased the starch content, and ramped up compounds called lectins and phytates that actually interfere with nutrient absorption. Here's the kicker. Ancient wheat varieties like einkorn had 14 chromosomes. Ema wheat had 28. Modern bread wheat has 42. That genetic complexity came with a massive trade-off. Modern wheat contains gluten proteins that your great-grandfather's gut never encountered. The gliadine fraction, the part responsible for most gluten. So it treats it like a foreign invader and responds with inflammation. Not because you're sensitive, because the wheat has been engineered into something your digestive system was never designed to process. But wait, it gets worse. Medieval flour was stone ground, a slow process that kept the wheat kernel intact. The bran, the germ, the endosperm all ground together. That meant fiber, healthy fats, B vitamins, minerals like magnesium and zinc, all still present in the flour. Modern roller milling, introduced in the 1870s, strips all of that away. Why? Because the bran and germ contain oils that go rancid, shortening shelf life and cutting into profits. What's left is pure white endosperm, basically pure starch and a damaged protein, structured out. Then it's bleached with chemicals like chlorine gas or benzoyl peroxide to make it whiter, because apparently we decided bread needs to look like paper. This is what's sold as enriched flour, enriched because they have to add back a tiny fraction of the nutrients they destroyed. It's like robbing a bank and then leaving $1 on the counter and calling yourself generous. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. Medieval bread was slow. After mixing flour and water, bakers let the dough rest and ferment for 12 to 24 hours, sometimes longer. This wasn't laziness. This was necessity. During that fermentation, natural yeast and bacteria broke down the starches and proteins. They pre-digested the bread for you. The gluten became easier to process. Phytic acid, which binds to minerals and blocks absorption, was neutralized. Lectins, which can damage the gut lining, were reduced. By the time that bread went into the oven, it was fundamentally transformed into something your body could actually use. Your modern supermarket loaf, mixed, risen, and baked in under 3 hours. No fermentation, no breakdown of no pre-digestion, just raw, reactive proteins hitting your gut at full strength. Here's something that'll blow your mind. The glycemic index of white bread is 75. That's higher than table sugar, which sits at 65. Read that again. Bread spikes your blood glucose faster than a candy bar. Your pancreas dumps insulin to handle the flood. Your blood sugar crashes an hour later. You feel hungry again. You eat more bread. The cycle repeats. Over years, this cycle leads to insulin resistance, the root cause of type 2 diabetes. Medieval bread, with its intact fiber and slow fermentation, had a much lower glycemic response. It released energy slowly. It kept you full for hours. It didn't trigger the hormonal chaos that modern bread does every single time. You eat it. That's why medieval peasants could work 12-hour days in the fields. They weren't crashing from blood sugar spikes. The bread actually sustained them. But there's another layer to this that makes it even worse. Modern wheat is doused with chemicals throughout its growing cycle. Herbicides, fungicides, insecticides. But the most disturbing practice is called pre-harvest desiccation. A week or two before harvest, farmers spray wheat fields with glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup. This kills the plant and dries it out, making harvest faster and more uniform. The problem? Glyphosate residue ends up in the grain. Studies have found glyphosate in over 70% of non-organic wheat products tested. The World Health Organization classifies it as a probable human carcinogen. But it does something even more insidious. It disrupts your gut microbiome. It kills beneficial bacteria that help you digest food and regulate your immune system. Medieval wheat never saw a single chemical. Grown in soil, enriched with manure and crop rotation. Harvested by hand. Stored in dry barns, clean. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like conspiracy theory nonsense. So let me give you the actual research. In 2014, researchers in Italy conducted a fascinating experiment. They took a group of people with irritable bowel syndrome, all of whom reported severe symptoms. After eating modern bread, they switched them to bread made from ancient einkorn wheat using traditional stone milling and long fermentation. The results? 80% reported significant improvement in symptoms. Less bloating, less pain, better digestion. The wheat wasn't the problem. The modern processing was. Another study from the University of Florence found that einkorn bread produced lower blood glucose and insulin responses compared to modern bread even when consumed in identical amounts. And here's what's really interesting. People who thought they were gluten intolerant discovered they could eat this ancient bread without any issues because gluten was never the real problem. The problem is what we did to the wheat. Studies from the University of Kansas found that modern wheat triggers significantly higher. The unique gliadin proteins in modern wheat, particularly a fragment called 33-MYR, are highly resistant to digestive enzymes. They pass through your stomach and small intestine largely intact, triggering immune responses in susceptible individuals. Your body isn't defective. The wheat is. So how did we get here? How did we go from bread that sustained civilizations to bread that makes people sick? The shift happened after World War II. Industrialization swept through agriculture. The goal was clear: feed a booming population cheaply and efficiently. Hybrid wheat varieties that produced 3 times the yield became the standard. Pesticides and herbicides eliminated the need for manual weeding. Roller mills processed grain faster and cheaper than stone mills, and commercial yeast replaced slow sourdough fermentation, cutting production time from 24 hours to 2 hours. That worked. Bread became cheaper and more available than ever in human history, but the cost was hidden. The cost was your health. Since 1960, type 2 diabetes rates have increased by 700%. Obesity rates have tripled. Autoimmune diseases like celiac, Crohn's, and ulcerative colitis have exploded. The industrial food system will tell you this is because we're sedentary, because we eat too much, because we lack willpower, but the timeline doesn't lie. These diseases began their exponential rise precisely when industrial wheat and industrial bread became the norm. The food industry optimized bread for shelf life, not for health. For profit margins. They bred wheat for yield, not for compatibility with the human digestive system. And when people started getting sick, the industry blamed the victims. You're gluten intolerant. You're sensitive. You have a disorder. No, you're reacting normally to an abnormal food. Alright, so what's the solution? How do you eat bread again without feeling like garbage? You have 3 main options. Option 1. Find bakers who use heritage wheat. Look for einkorn, emmer or spelt. Make sure it's stone ground and naturally fermented. These bakers are rare, but they exist. Check farmers markets, specialty bakeries, or even online sources that ship. Yes, it's more expensive, but you're paying for actual food, not a chemical experiment. Option 2. Make your own sourdoughh. I know, I don't have time for that, but hear me out. Buy heritage wheat flour to start a sourdough culture. There are thousands of tutorials online. Mix your dough the night before. Let it ferment 12 to 24 hours. Bake it. Yes, It takes time up front to learn, but once you develop the routine, it's no harder than any other weekly meal prep, and the result is bread that nourishes instead of harms. Plus, there's something deeply satisfying about making real food with your own hands. Option 3. Reduce bread consumption entirely. Medieval peasants ate bread because wheat was cheap and caloried. You have options. They did in single quotes tea. Oats, barley, quinoa, rice, especially if prepared properly with soaking or fermenting, can provide the same sustenance without the inflammatory load of modern bread. The point isn't to live like a medieval peasant. The point is to recognize that their bread was real food and yours isn't. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying everyone needs to completely eliminate bread. I'm saying you need to be conscious about what you're actually eating, because when you understand the difference between real bread and industrial bread product, you can make informed choices instead of just accepting whatever the food industry puts in front of you. Here's what really gets me about this whole situation. The knowledge of how to make real bread was never lost. It was deliberately abandoned in favor of efficiency and profit. Small-scale bakers across Europe kept making traditional bread the whole time. They never switched to roller-milled flour. They never added chemicals, and their customers never got sick from eating their bread. But industrial food companies convinced everyone that their way was better, faster, cheaper, more convenient. And we believed them because, why wouldn't we? Now we're dealing with epidemics of metabolic disease and autoimmune conditions that barely existed 70 years ago. And instead of looking at what changed in our food supply, we're told the problem is us. We're too lazy. We eat too much. We need more willpower. It's gaslighting on a massive scale. The truth is simple. We stopped making bread. We started manufacturing a product that looks like bread, but behaves in the body like poison. Medieval wheat wasn't a superfood because it had magical properties. It was a superfood because it was left alone, grown in healthy soil, milled with care, fermented with patience, baked with respect for the process. That's the knowledge the food industry doesn't want you to have. Because if you understand that the problem isn't gluten, isn't wheat, but industrial processing, you stop buying their products. You start demanding real food. You take control of your health. Look, I get it. This is overwhelming. You've been eating bread your whole life. You've been told it's fine, it's normal, it's just food. But now you know better. You know why you feel like garbage after eating modern bread. You know what changed. You know it's not your fault. And most importantly, you know there's another way. Every time you choose real bread over industrial imitation, you're reclaiming a piece of ancient knowledge. Knowledge that kept people healthy when life was hard. Knowledge that still works today. The medieval peasant with his dark, dense loaf of sourdough wasn't ignorant. He was working with a system perfected over thousands of years. We traded that system for convenience and profit. And we're paying the price with our health, but you don't have to keep paying that price. The choice is yours. The secret was never lost. It was just forgotten, and now you know the truth. Drop a comment and let me know, are you going to try finding real bread? Or are you going to make your own? I want to hear what you decide to do with this information. Hit subscribe if this opened your eyes to what's really happening with our food supply, because there's a lot more buried knowledge we need to dig up the bread. Betrayal ends when you stop accepting what they're selling and start demanding what you deserve. Real food that actually nourishes you, that's it. That's the truth. They don't want you to know. Now go make better choices.